Let's begin.
I'm so used to being grilled on this subject. Like, I'll get into the weirdest discussions with people totally out of the blue, randomly, whatever. It's just slow night and boom, and it's just riff. Because I can't sit and like do nothing. Like if I'll have like sort of right, I'll have sort of entertaining or not entertaining, but I'll have sort of either political or sociological, economical discussions because I've got life experience, having done, working in construction, having done, working in a recycling plant as a cleaner. I've done, retail, I've done management. So I've done a lot of things where I can riff on a lot of topics. So
it sounds more like you want to keep your mind as engaged.
Well, the thing is that I think, I've done this for long enough, and, people always find funny when I say that, yeah, I don't do this, I don't do this job, being intoxicated or using any sort of anything. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I don't smoke. So, I'll occasionally have like a random shot, but it's sort of a running joke with me that I'm, very square within my circle. So
I think I'm going to do this job, Silver.
Right. There you go.
I don't drink, but I smoke a lot of pot.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'll do like since 2020. Like I've done this job since 2008, but since 2020, I found because I was doing caregiving in that time period, a family member, had some major accidents, and I was, I was the daughter. So yeah, you end up sort of shuffled into that position of care worker. But that was the time when I started doing CBD oil. So I did. I got into it sort of by accident because I was so stressed that I was like, how do I deal with this? And then I think, getting a smoothie. I was on errands or whatever, like groceries, and I found a little sort of like a health food store, and they had like a little rack of like CBD stuff. And I was like, looking at it, and they had like an ointment and like a tincture and stuff like that. And so I think I got an ointment jar. And because I would use it on my feet or whatever to like, just seep. Because when you put stuff on your feet, then it'll seep into your system. And then I got like a tincture bottle. So like an oil-based sort of stuff. And then originally I thought I would use it for my mom because she was the one I was taking care of, and because she would have sort of stress situations. And then I did the research, does it have any side effects with medication? And then apparently it would get canceled. Like if you do any sort of marijuana stuff with like a pain medication, it'll cancel each other out.
Okay.
Which I didn't know. And so I'm like, well, okay, I guess, I guess she's not going to be using this because actually, no, because it was, to help her sleep as well because her insomnia was just not, not stopping. But then, I ended up just putting it into my tea, and I'm like, I'm going to take a few drops, 12 drops later, because the stress, just, skyrockets when you're getting like 3 to 4 hours of sleep, and, you're not the only caregiver, but I was basically doing that like 12 hours a day.
You're feeling
fuck,
like
12 hours a day. It was like, whatever, basically I would start off whenever she'd get up, which was like, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, as I'm like trying not to swear.
It'll be fine.
Right.
All right. When I hit the record button, we just do like 5 seconds of silence before I start talking, so it gets a base level of the silence.
That works.
Starts with the production. Ready? Welcome to Town Hall on 88.7 The River, local radio at its best. I'm Chris, and departure this week, filling in for Murray Calder. Hang on, let's start that over again. Welcome to Town Hall. This is Chris Holden, filling in for Murray Calder, and a little departure on this week's show. I'm joined by special guest Adrienne Spring. How are you doing, Adrienne?
I'm doing vertical. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks for asking. Adrienne, do you prefer if I refer to you as an adult entertainer or exotic dancer? What do you prefer?
You also forgot to mention the comment of stripper or the moniker stripper. Personally, I don't really mind any of those because when you look at the history of stripping as a job, it's been sort of everything from like burlesque, ecdysiast, burly Q queen. Like it's sort of the entire spectrum through the entire job. It depends on whether you're Canadian, American, European. Like there's no sort of one label that works. I think some women, when they get called strippers, they do get angry about it.
There's
but
a connotation to
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. It's a derogatory connotation.
Sure.
But the thing that I find interesting about that is that you do take off your clothes like an onion, so you strip. Like that's literally it's an action. So you strip. If you don't like it, you might need to find a different job. I don't know.
So we were talking off the air before, and
Mm-hmm.
you haven't always worked in this career.
Nope.
So tell us about the career that you were in before
Mm-hmm.
you started stripping.
Well, basically, I did retail for a number of years in Vancouver, basically on Robson Street, which is like the high end sort of, basically just everything from like stores, restaurants, businesses. But yeah, no, I did that for a number of years, and then I did sort of managerial work in that industry, and I was getting paid $8.50 an hour. My raise was 25 cents.
Wow.
So it was I couldn't survive. Like I was doing, or I had college, that I was doing at the time, and the money just wasn't there. Like you can't pay off debt if you can barely get like a transit pass for the month.
No.
It just doesn't work. And then you look at accommodation, then you look at food, then you look at what do you need, other stuff. It just doesn't work.
So tell us a little bit about the industry that you were in working in retail.
Basically, I started in Western Canada. At this point, I've traveled across 6 provinces. And I started, when I started, the entire point was to, like, what I was told from my agent was you're there to be an entertainer. You're there to, just have fun with the audience, interact with them and just, make their time in the bar enjoyable. That was the whole point.
When you got into this as a career,
Mm-hmm.
hang on, let me start that question over again. What were your notions of the adult entertainment industry as a career before you got into the work yourself?
I didn't really know anything much about it because when I was, a manager in retail, what I would do is that I would go into the local strip club at the time, which was in Vancouver, which is now sadly no longer in existence, which was the Cecil. And, I loved watching, women perform. I love watching good shows. I loved watching entertainers. It's a distraction because it's like I was, dealing with high stress job, basically 6 to 7 days a week, overtime, whatever. And it's like, people are exhausting to deal with as a public.
Yeah.
Anybody that's worked in like a service industry will tell you that. Like anything from like, well, you've got like store retail, and then you've got like service in like a restaurant, which I think is
Sure.
one of the most abused service members in the world. Because they deal with God knows how many families with undisciplined kids, screaming, throwing food all over the place, running all over, the crawling underneath the table, throwing food, etc.
I've seen plenty of undisciplined.
That's a nightmare. That's a nightmare position to be in.
I've seen plenty of undisciplined adults in restaurant situations.
Right.
Who don't
Well,
get
that
catch up fast
too.
enough.
That too. I mean, people going through breakups, people going through disagreements, arguments. God knows what. So I mean, it's a messy. Whenever you deal with people, you deal with sort of disastrous situations. So
So, try to think of a way that I'm bridging these together here. How did you find dealing with the public when you were working in the retail sector, versus dealing with the public now?
Basically, to be honest, not much different. The only difference, I just wear less clothing and get paid better. That's the only difference. It's just because both industries are disrespected by the public. A lot of people, when you're dealing with the teller, in a grocery store, when you deal with the person bagging your groceries, when you deal with, especially now, we're going into like, winter season with, Halloween, we're dealing with, then it's going to be Christmas, and God help anybody who's in any sort of, retail situation and that stuff. Because people would come into my store looking for whatever item and then get angry at me because I didn't have the item when I'm sorry, you slept in. That's your fault. You didn't get here early enough. But either that or like, like I've never been a cashier in a grocery store, but I mean, that would be like a bloody nightmare. The amount of people that would come in. I think I was, as a traveler, I'd go cross country and into the States, just for like fun and stuff. And you see, the amount of people that, whenever grocery line, some people, they're tired, they're drunk, they're high, they're on whatever, the people that would come into the grocery store and steal stuff. And there's nothing security can really do because it's like, certain people will come in specifically to take certain things. But what are you going to do? Like turn them around and say, sorry, you can't come in here? Like how many people do that when they deal with hundreds of people per day, right? Like it just doesn't work.
You mentioned that the pay wasn't good when you were working in the retail sector.
Nope.
Did you get overtime pay? Did you work a lot of overtime hours or the weekend involved in that?
Well, I mean, the thing is that even if I did, it wasn't much. Like, what is overtime with $8.50 an hour?
Yeah.
Like, it's not much. And then because I never learned to drive, which was the dumbest thing I've done in my life. Like if I knew how to drive, then I'd probably have a few more options in life. But semi kidding, but also semi serious, because the avenue of driving gives you a lot of like freedom to travel to more obscure locations, or find different jobs if you wanted to be like a trucker or whatever. Then it gives you a lot of options.
How do you typically tend to travel now? Because this is a career that you're in now that tends to lead to a lot of traveling around.
Yep.
How do you get from A to B?
Well, it depends on the province. As my smoothie says hello. What I would do, I used to travel by Greyhound. Now that's gone. So basically there's in Western Canada, there's very few companies stepped up to replace them. So basically anybody that's low income in this country is screwed. Like,
Uber's fine within a town or within a community, but Uber isn't taking you province to province.
No. It's basically depending on city. It's either Uber, Lyft, YouRide. If there's another option, I don't know it yet. It would have to depend on which location. But then in this province, Via Rail is sort of my mode of transport a lot. Via Rail and basically flights.
How did I asked you before about the expectations of the industry, what your kind of preconceived notions of it before you got involved.
Mm-hmm.
How did the notions of what you thought it would be like working in the industry line up with reality once you'd begun?
Preconceived. Well, I didn't really have many preconceived notions. I mean, what I did do, I tried to research the business in like books or like memoirs or something. And a lot of women in the industry, when they leave, like they don't, very few will like have a recorded sort of, I guess, annotation of their experiences in their life. Because it is a job that has a lot of stigma with regarding to, on so many levels. Even though a lot of people that are in very high-end professional lives now were exotic dancers at one point, because it's very hard to pay for like a heavy-duty education on a civilian job. Like it just doesn't really work. So what I did do, actually, there's a very well-known performer in the U.S. Known as Dita Von Teese, and she had a fabulous book, which I tracked down and got a hold of it through Amazon. I ordered that one, then basically read it cover to cover. So that was kind of what I did. And she sort of explores the history of, burlesque performing, and because the thing is that a lot of people think of it as a modern thing, but it's actually not. Mm-hmm. It's in North America as a whole, it's been a thing in different incarnations since like the 1800s, since the gold rush and sort of around that time. Because as long as there's blue collar workers or industrial workers or whatever you want to call it, depending on which industry you're in, adult entertainment has always been a factor of entertainment. People are bored, people are tired, people are stressed, so they want to see an engaging performance. They want to, get out of their head, their stress from life, whatever, both genders. But, back in the day, it was more focused on men. Now it's kind of either or.
Sure.
So, yeah.
These stigmas, as you talk about, I mean, it's definitely an industry that's loaded with stigma on all different angles of it.
Oh, yeah.
How do you tackle that? It seems that your approach seems to be very head-on.
Oh, yeah. I'm very balls to the wall without the balls.
How do you find girls that maybe don't have your confidence in your linguistic ability, and able to talk, able to articulate what you think about it? How do they tackle it? Does it affect them more? Is it a harder thing for someone that can't express their thoughts on it articulately enough?
It can be. I think it's a job that, and this is what I find actually a lot of people that come into the business, and that's what I've done mentoring for the job, not quite so much since I started it, but because of my sort of non-partying ways, quite often dancers that did have sort of party inclination would book with me when they wanted to stay sober, or when they wanted to kind of, not be enabled by, friends that they knew that would be sort of like, oh, hey, have another drink. Oh, hey, do this, because they knew that I was clean and I wasn't going to do that. So I was sort of I guess you could say, safety blanket for a number of the performers. But one of the things that I did say with a number of women that would come into the business, or people to this day that inquire about getting into it, is that physically it's hard, mentally it's harder, because you're interacting with a lot of the public like full time, like that's your job. And as I said earlier, people are exhausting to deal with. So I can understand why people do get into alcohol, drugs, whatever, because it's coping, but it's also sort of self-medication from stress, distraction, whatever, it helps you to loosen up. So for me, I've been accused sometimes of being too professional. At one point, somebody, shaking my hand is like, you should be in Congress, you're so professional. And I'm like, do I look like I'm dressed for Congress? Like, goddamn, like, what the hell are you smoking? But it's it's basically then one of the other jokes that I say is, just because you're wearing a 3-piece suit doesn't mean you're not hiding more than a stripper will ever do with the floss in her ass cheeks. Like or another phrasing that I do is, the higher the collar, the bigger the closet, because the amount of professional, literally clergymen that have a lot more to hide than any of us ever did. And yet the sort of religiosity in people is more respected than the sort of erotic freedom, I guess you could say, of adult performers.
You told me that you've been doing this for about 12 years now.
12 and a half.
Do you consider yourself an industry veteran, or are you, you tell me, are you a veteran within the industry?
I pretty much am, I guess you could say, in the industry, because I've also traveled. I was also in, New Zealand, Australia, doing like exhibition shows as a performer. And it's something that, and also in the States doing, we would do contests, so it wasn't work, but it was basically I loved meeting people, I love connecting with people, I like meeting international performers. I met some friends from New Zealand, Australia, across the States. It was an excuse for me to like visit places I've never been. So I love New Orleans. That's one of my favorite places in the U.S. And it's an avenue of, I guess, travel, pretty much. It gives a lot of possibility.
So would you say, you've done it for a while, you travel around and seen a lot of other colleagues within the industry. What's the typical lifespan of somebody that does this? Do you find that you're a typical case for the amount of time you've done it, or is this something that girls get into, do for a while, get out of?
I guess I am definitely of the older school sort of generation in the entertainment world, especially in Western Canada. We did have more sort of longevity in the business. I think older school performers, they would be 15, 16, 17 years was kind of the sort of average. Now I think it's a lot less, partially because I guess the environment has changed. Also, longevity of locations to work has dropped.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, why are you gonna, necessarily stick with the location or stick with the industry if a lot of places that you would work are going under?
I've heard it compared to sports and
Yeah.
athletes in the past,
Oh, yeah.
as far as you have a set window of time
Mhm.
to make what you're going to be able to make
Mhm.
through your professional career. Is that a fair assessment, do you find, or is it
Um,
something that, based
I-
on yourself and your ability to travel and willingness
Mhm.
to do it, you can do it for as
Right.
long as you like? Or?
I think it is connected, for the very simple reason that if in any sort of physical profession, if you don't maintain yourself
Sure.
mentally, physically, you're gonna crumble like a fucking stale cookie. Like, it's not gonna work, right? As I drop an F-bomb or 5.
We got like the last minute here of this first segment, and I'm just trying to bridge us into the second half. Okay, we're getting ready to take a break. Oh, my segues suck.
What was the topic? I can do it.
We're moving towards a break here on Town Hall. When we come back in the second half, I want to ask you about surprises that you've had working in the industry. And that could be good surprises, it could be bad surprises.
Well, that's definitely a good topic, actually, because the surprise that I discovered, like, I'd done the job for, at that point, I think, I don't even know how long, like 11 years or something, and then 2020 hit everybody in the face like a slobby flapjack. And then I worked, as a caregiver during the pandemic, and then I also worked in a recycling plant as a cleaner, and then did tiling. And the thing is that I discovered that in my recycling plant job, exploitation was like, everybody assumes adult industry work is exploitive, and yet in a lot of blue collar jobs, exploitation is rampant, and the pay is not an issue. Like, not an issue. The pay is an issue. Like, they literally break their backs, like break their bodies into pieces, and have injuries, deal with WCB, deal with like no accountability of a lot of these large corporations. And none of the guys tend to speak up. Like, the amount of how many unions, depending on the job, how many unions are actually going to fight for you? Are there unions that undercut other unions that undercut workers? But in the adult industry work, when you're in it by personal choice, you can choose to leave, move to another location. A lot of people can't do that. Like, if you're stuck in a blue collar job, you're stuck. Like, how can you, how many people can move from one, corporate, or not, how many people can work in one sort of heavy duty job, move to another heavy duty job, when the problem is in both industries or both locations?
So we will talk about exploitation and surprises after the break on Town Hall. We'll be right back.